The rain had been falling since morning, and the sky looked like it had forgotten how to smile. The streets were wet and empty, except for a few cars that passed by with their headlights cutting through the mist. She walked quickly, holding her old coat tighter around her body. It wasn't really a coat meant for rain, but it was all she had. The collar was torn on one side and the buttons didn't match, but it kept her warm enough to get through another long day. Her name was Emily Carter, though hardly anyone used it. Most people just called her Miss or Hey You. That was fine with her. Names meant connection, and connection meant pain. She had learned that long ago, bouncing from one foster home to another. Every time she thought she might belong, someone new came along and reminded her that she didn't. That night, Emily was walking home from the diner where she worked. The smell of fried food still clung to her clothes, mixed with the faint scent of coffee and cleaning detergent. Her shift had ended 2 hours late because the night cook didn't show up again. She didn't complain. She never did. Complaining didn't pay bills, and bills didn't wait for sympathy. Her shoes were soaked through by the time she reached the bus stop, only to see the last bus already leaving. She could have shouted, but she just stood there, watching the red taillights disappear down the wet road. She sighed, pulled out her cracked phone, and saw one unread message. It was from her landlord. Rent due tomorrow. No excuses this time. She closed her eyes for a second. The words felt heavy, like everything else lately. Her paycheck from the diner wouldn't come until next week, and she already owed too much. Maybe she'd skip another meal or two. She was used to hunger. It was a familiar kind of silence. Emily started walking again, her breath making small clouds in the cold air. She cut through side streets to save time. Her neighborhood wasn't the safest, but it was all she could afford. She passed a few dark shops, a closed pharmacy, and a bar with a flickering neon sign that read open, even though it clearly wasn't. As she walked, she thought about the way her boss had looked at her earlier. "You gotta smile more, Emily," he had said. "Customers don't like gloomy faces." She wanted to tell him that fake smiles were harder than double shifts, but instead she just nodded and wiped another table, pretending not to care. Her phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't her landlord. It was a number she didn't recognize. The message was short. "Text me when you get home," she frowned. No one ever texted her except her landlord or her manager. Maybe it was a wrong number. Still, something about it made her pause. She typed back quickly, "Who is this?" No reply came. The little typing bubble didn't appear. Just silence. She put the phone back in her pocket and kept walking, her heart beating a little faster than before. By the time she reached her street, the rain had turned into a drizzle. Her apartment building stood at the end of the block, old and gray like a tired man leaning on a cane. The hallway smelled of damp carpet and cigarette smoke. She climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, each step creaking under her weight. Her apartment was small. Just one room with a bed, a tiny kitchen, and a window that didn't close all the way. The paint was peeling near the ceiling, and one of the lights had burned out weeks ago. She didn't bother turning on the other one. The dim glow from the street lamp outside was enough. She kicked off her wet shoes and dropped her bag on the floor. For a long moment, she just stood there, staring at the wall, trying to gather the strength to move. Finally, she sank onto the bed and pulled her knees to her chest. The phone buzzed again. Unknown number. "You okay?" Her stomach tightened. Whoever it was, they seemed to know she'd made it home. She looked around, her eyes scanning the shadows in the corners of the room. There was no one there, of course, but that didn't calm her nerves. She typed slowly, "Who are you?" "Why are you texting me?" This time the reply came almost instantly. "You dropped something tonight." Emily's mind raced. She checked her pockets, wallet, phone, keys, all there. She hadn't dropped anything. Unless, her heart skipped. Could someone from work have found something? Maybe her bus pass or her apron? But then how would they know where she lived? She swallowed hard and typed again. "What did I drop?" A long pause. Then, "Come outside." The words sent a chill down her spine. She stared at the screen, unsure if it was some kind of prank. Her building didn't even have a proper security door, and the idea of stepping outside in the middle of the night made her skin crawl. She typed, hands trembling a little. "No. Who is this?" No response. After a few minutes of silence, she threw the phone onto the bed and rubbed her face. Probably some bored teenager playing games. She'd had worse things happen in her life. Still, something about it wouldn't let her rest. She got up and went to the window. The street below was quiet, the wet pavement shining under the streetlights. A stray cat darted across the road and a car passed by slowly before turning the corner. Nothing seemed unusual. Then she saw it. At the far end of the alley beside her building, near the dumpster, there was a small bundle on the ground. At first she thought it was a pile of clothes, but then faintly she saw movement. She froze. It moved again. Without thinking, she grabbed her coat and phone, ran down the stairs, and pushed open the front door. The cold air hit her face, sharp and wet. Her footsteps splashed in shallow puddles as she hurried toward the alley. When she got close, she could hear it. A soft, shaky sound. Not an animal. A cry. Her breath caught in her throat. She knelt down beside the bundle and carefully pulled back the thin, damp blanket. Inside was a baby, tiny, barely breathing, skin pale from the cold. Emily's whole body trembled. She had no idea what to do. She looked around expecting anyone to appear. But the alley was empty. Her phone slipped from her hand and hit the ground. The screen lit up with another message from the same unknown number. Take care of her. Her heart raced. She picked up the phone and stared at the words, not believing what she was seeing. She turned around, scanning the street, but no one was there. Only rain. She looked back at the baby. The little one's tiny fingers curled weakly and a soft whimper escaped her lips. That sound cut through Emily's fear like sunlight through clouds. I've got you, she whispered, her voice breaking. It's okay. I've got you. She took off her coat and wrapped it around the baby, pressing her close to her chest. The warmth of that tiny heartbeat made something deep inside her stir, something she hadn't felt in years. She ran toward the main street, holding the baby tight, her mind a blur of panic and instinct. She flagged down the first car she saw. Please, help, there's a baby, she shouted. The driver, an older woman, gasped and unlocked the door. Get in. At the hospital, everything happened in flashes. The nurses rushing forward, the baby being carried away. Questions she couldn't answer. Where did she find her? Did she know who left her there? Did she have any family? Emily shook her head to all of them. No, I just found her. When they asked for her name, she hesitated before giving it. Emily Carter. It felt strange to say it out loud, as if it suddenly mattered again. Hours later, after the baby was taken for tests, a nurse came back to tell her the baby would be okay. Just cold, a little dehydrated, but alive. Emily nodded, tears stinging her eyes. Can I see her? She asked quietly. The nurse smiled gently. Just for a minute. When she walked into the small room, the baby was sleeping, wrapped in a clean blanket, a tiny pink hat on her head. Emily stood there watching, her chest tight. She didn't know who this baby was or why fate had led her down that alley. But as she looked at her, she felt something strange. Like maybe, just maybe, this wasn't an accident. Maybe both of them had been left behind by the world. And maybe somehow they had found each other. Emily sat beside the baby and whispered softly, You're not alone, okay? Not anymore. Outside, the rain finally stopped. The hospital waiting room was quiet except for the soft hum of machines and the rain tapping against the windows. Emily sat in one of the hard plastic chairs, her hands clasped tightly around a paper cup of coffee she wasn't drinking. Her clothes were still damp and her hair clung to her face, but she didn't care. All she could think about was the baby she had found. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that little face, cold, pale, and helpless. It made her chest ache in a way she couldn't explain. She didn't know the baby's name, where she came from, or why someone would leave her like that. The thought of it made her stomach twist. A nurse walked by and gave her a small smile. You can rest in the lounge if you want. You've been here all night, Emily nodded politely. I'm fine. I'll wait here. The nurse hesitated but didn't press her. When she left, Emily let out a shaky breath. Her phone sat silent in her lap. That strange number hadn't sent another message since the one that said, take care of her. She wanted to believe it was just some random text, but deep down she knew it wasn't. Whoever had sent it knew about the baby. She thought about showing the police the messages, but something stopped her. Maybe it was fear, or maybe it was the strange feeling that this whole thing was meant for her to find. Hours passed before a doctor approached her. He was kind-looking, with tired eyes behind his glasses. The baby's stable, he said softly. You found her just in time. A few more hours in that weather and it might have been too late. Emily swallowed hard. She's really going to be okay? He nodded. Yes, she'll need to stay here for observation, but she's strong. She's a fighter. A fighter. The word hit Emily deeply. That's what people used to call her too, though most days she didn't feel like one. The doctor asked her a few questions. Where she found the baby, what time, if she'd seen anyone around. Emily told him everything she could remember, which wasn't much. Just the rain, the alley, the small bundle by the dumpster. She didn't mention the texts. Something about them felt too strange to say out loud. After signing a few forms, the doctor thanked her again for saving the child. You did a good thing, he said before walking away. Emily leaned back in her chair, staring up at the ceiling lights. For the first time in years, someone had said she did something good. She didn't know how to take it. By the time morning came, the rain had stopped. The city outside looked washed clean, bright sunlight reflecting off the wet streets. Emily finally stood and stretched her stiff legs. She was about to leave when a nurse called her name. Miss Carter? The baby's awake now. Would you like to see her? Her heart jumped. Can I? Just for a minute. The nurse led her down a quiet hallway to a small nursery room. Inside, the baby lay in a crib, wrapped snugly in a soft blanket, tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. She looked peaceful now, warm and safe. Emily stood beside the crib, her fingers gripping the railing. The baby's eyes fluttered open, deep, curious eyes that seemed to look right at her. Hey there, Emily whispered. You're a tough one, huh? The baby made a small sound like a sigh, and Emily smiled for the first time in a long while. When she turned to leave, the nurse handed her a piece of paper. The police might want to talk to you again later today. We'll call if they have any updates. Emily nodded and left the hospital. The sun felt strange on her skin after the long, wet night. She walked home slowly, feeling both exhausted and alive at the same time. Her phone buzzed again as she reached her apartment. Her heart skipped. It was that number again. Unknown number. Thank you. She stopped on the sidewalk, staring at the message. Her fingers hovered over the screen. Who are you? She typed quickly. The reply came just as fast. Someone who couldn't do what you did. Emily's chest tightened. Are you the baby's mother? She typed, her hands shaking, but this time there was no answer. The typing bubble appeared, then disappeared. She waited for several minutes, but the silence stretched on. Finally, she locked her phone and went inside. The rest of the day passed in a blur. She tried to rest, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw that alley again. The sound of the baby crying echoed in her mind. And now there was that message. Someone who couldn't do what you did. She couldn't stop thinking about what it meant. That evening, she went back to work at the diner. Her boss gave her a strange look when she came in late, but she didn't care. For the first time, the noise of the diner didn't bother her. She moved automatically, pouring coffee, taking orders, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. When her shift ended, she walked past the same alley again. She stopped where she had found the baby. The ground was still damp, and there was nothing left there. No blanket, no clue. No sign that something life-changing had happened just a day before. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Don't be afraid. Emily's breath caught. She spun around, scanning the shadows, but the street was empty. She typed fast. Where are you? Why are you texting me? A long pause. Then I can't come back. But you did the right thing. Tears burned behind her eyes. Who are you? She typed again, no response. Just silence. She stayed there a long time before finally heading home. The messages made her uneasy, but there was also a strange comfort in them, like she wasn't completely alone in this. The next morning, there was a knock at her door. When she opened it, a police officer stood there holding a clipboard. Miss Carter? He asked politely. Yes. I'm Detective Ross. I wanted to thank you for what you did. We're still investigating the case of the infant you found. Emily nodded. Did you find out who she belongs to? Not yet, he said. No one's come forward. We're running tests, but these things take time. He hesitated before adding, Do you remember seeing anyone around that night? She shook her head. No, just the baby. He scribbled something down. We might contact you again if we need more information. As he turned to leave, she blurted out, What'll happen to her? The baby? She'll be placed under temporary care until we can locate family or arrange adoption. Adoption. The word echoed in Emily's mind long after he left. For the rest of the week, she couldn't focus on anything. Every sound, every movement on her phone made her jump. She wanted to forget, but she couldn't. She found herself thinking about the baby constantly, the way she had looked at her, the small weight in her arms. Then one night, another message appeared. Unknown number. Her name is Lily. Emily's eyes filled with tears. Is she your daughter? She typed, no reply. Why did you leave her? She sent again. Still nothing. Finally, she wrote one last message. If you love her, come back. She needs you. The screen stayed blank. Then after several long minutes, a single message appeared. You're the one she needs now. Emily dropped the phone onto her lap and stared at it. The words didn't make sense, but deep down they did. Something inside her shifted that night. She didn't know how or why, but she couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just changed in ways she didn't yet understand. Over the next few days, she went back to the hospital whenever she could. The nurses started to recognize her and would smile when she walked in. There's someone excited to see you, one of them would say, leading her to the nursery. Each time Emily looked at Lily, she felt something new growing inside her, a mix of fear, hope, and a strange sense of belonging. It scared her how much she cared already. One afternoon, while she sat beside the crib humming softly, the nurse came over. The police still haven't found the mother, she said quietly. It's sad, really. That little one's been through a lot already. Emily nodded slowly. Yeah, I know the feeling. The nurse smiled kindly. You've got a big heart, Miss Carter. Emily looked at the sleeping baby and whispered, I just don't want her to feel alone. That night, when she got home, there were no new messages. But she didn't need one. Something told her that whoever had been texting her was gone for good. She sat by her window, watching the city lights flicker below. Somewhere out there, a woman had made a heartbreaking choice, and somehow that choice had led Emily to Lily. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, she felt a small spark of purpose. Maybe fate had a strange way of bringing lost souls together. And maybe, just maybe, the story of that night wasn't over yet. The city had already started to warm again. Though the nights were still cool, Emily found herself walking to the hospital almost every day after work. She told herself it was just to check on the baby, but deep down she knew it was more than that. Something about Lily drew her in. It wasn't just pity or curiosity, it was a pull, like an invisible thread tying them together. Each time she walked through the hospital doors, the nurses smiled when they saw her. One of them, an older woman named Janet, had started saving her a seat near the nursery window. You're here again? Janet said one morning with a gentle laugh. That little one's going to start recognizing your voice soon. Emily smiled shyly. I don't mind. It's quiet here. Janet tilted her head. Quiet can be nice, but sometimes it's also lonely. Emily didn't reply, but she knew what the nurse meant. For most of her life, she had been surrounded by noise. Arguments in foster homes, the constant chatter at the diner, the hum of city traffic outside her window. Yet she'd never felt more alone than in those moments of silence when no one was there to call her name. When she looked at Lily through the glass, something inside her softened. The baby was getting stronger now, her cheeks rounder, her eyes brighter. Emily sometimes sat for hours just watching her breathe. A few days later, the police called again. The same detective who had visited before asked her to stop by the station to answer a few more questions. She went after her shift, nervous but calm. The station was busy, phones ringing, officers moving in and out, the smell of coffee and paper in the air. The detective met her in a small interview room with light blue walls and a table that had seen better days. Miss Carter, he greeted her with a nod. Thanks for coming in again. We've been working hard on the case. Emily sat down. Did you find the baby's mother? He exhaled slowly. Not yet, but we did find something interesting. He slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a printout from what looked like a lab report. Routine procedure, he explained. Whenever a child is abandoned, we collect DNA samples to help identify possible relatives. In this case, something unexpected came up. Emily frowned, confused. What do you mean? The detective hesitated. Your DNA came up as a partial match. She blinked, unsure she'd heard right. Mine, that can't be. He nodded. It surprised us too. We ran it twice to confirm. Statistically, this means you and the baby are closely related. Possibly half-siblings, maybe even aunt and niece. We're still narrowing it down. Emily stared at him, her mouth slightly open. That's impossible. I don't have any family, and are you sure? He asked gently. She nodded quickly. I grew up in foster care. My mother left me when I was a baby. They told me there were no relatives. The detective studied her face for a moment, then said softly, Sometimes the past has a way of finding us, Miss Carter, whether we're ready or not. Emily left the station feeling like the ground beneath her had shifted. The air felt heavier, every sound sharper. Could it really be true? That baby, the one she had found in the alley, was somehow part of her? That night she sat by her window staring at the city lights. Her phone was on the table beside her. No new messages. No explanations. Just silence. She picked it up, scrolling through the old messages from that unknown number. Take care of her. You did the right thing. You're the one she needs now. Her heart thudded as a thought hit her. What if those messages weren't from a stranger? What if they were from someone who knew her? Someone connected to her past? She opened the contacts on her phone, but there was no clue. The number wasn't saved, and when she tried calling it, she heard only a cold, robotic voice. This number is no longer in service. She closed her eyes and whispered to herself, Who are you? The next morning she returned to the hospital. When she saw Lily again, all the confusion and fear faded for a moment. The baby smiled, just a tiny, almost invisible smile, and Emily's heart melted. Later that week, the detective called again. We found a possible relative, he said. A woman named Claire Matthews. She came up as a strong match to both you and the baby. Emily's breath caught. Who is she? She says she's your half-sister. The words didn't make sense at first. Half-sister? Emily had lived her whole life believing she was alone. Now suddenly there was someone out there with her blood. The detective continued. She lives about 2 hours from here. She'd like to meet you if you're open to it. Emily hesitated, her fingers tightening around the phone. She didn't know if she was ready, but she also knew she couldn't keep running from the truth. I'll meet her, she said quietly. The meeting was arranged at a small cafe near the hospital. The day was cool, the sky clear for the first time in weeks. Emily arrived early, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. When the door opened, a woman about 10 years older than her walked in. She had tired eyes but a warm smile. There was something familiar in her face, something that made Emily's chest tighten. Emily? The woman asked softly. Yes, Emily replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm Claire. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They just looked at each other, studying the pieces of themselves they didn't know existed. Finally, Claire sat down and wrapped her hands around a cup of tea. I didn't know you were alive, she said, her voice trembling. Our mother? She told me about you right before she passed away. She said she had to give you up when she was young. I've been trying to find you for months. Emily blinked back tears. She gave me up and never came back. I thought I was completely alone. Claire nodded, eyes wet. She made mistakes. A lot of them. But she always said she loved you. She just didn't know how to fix things. They sat in silence for a while, both lost in the weight of what could have been. Finally, Emily asked, The baby, Lily, how is she connected to all this? Claire looked down at her cup, her hands shaking slightly. She's my daughter. Emily froze. Claire continued in a whisper. I made mistakes too. I was in a bad place, lost everything. I didn't think I could take care of her. I thought leaving her somewhere safe was the only way she'd survive. But I never expected you'd be the one to find her. Tears slipped down Emily's face. You're the one who texted me. Claire nodded slowly. I didn't know what else to do. I wanted to tell someone, but I was scared the police would take her forever. When I saw you on the news, the girl who found the baby, I recognized your name. Carter. That's when I realized who you were. I sent the messages before I turned off the phone. I just needed to know she was okay. Emily covered her mouth, emotions crashing over her like a wave. All the confusion, all the sleepless nights. It all made sense now. You could have come to me, she said softly. I didn't think you'd want to see me, Claire whispered. I didn't even know if you'd believe me. They sat there, two broken women bound by blood and a child who had brought them back together. After a long silence, Emily asked, What happens now? Claire wiped her eyes. I don't know. I want to get my life back together. For Lily, for both of us. But I know I don't deserve your help. Emily looked at her sister, really looked at her. Beneath the guilt and sadness, she saw someone who was trying. Someone who had made bad choices but wasn't beyond saving. You don't have to do it alone, Emily said quietly. Neither of us does. Claire stared at her in disbelief. You'd really help me? After everything? Emily smiled faintly. Maybe we both need a second chance. When they left the cafe, the sky was beginning to turn pink with sunset. The two of them walked side by side, uncertain of what came next, but somehow knowing they weren't walking alone anymore. That night, as Emily stood by the hospital window watching Lily sleep, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Her phone buzzed on the chair beside her. One new message. This time it wasn't from an unknown number. It was from Claire. Thank you for not giving up on me. Emily smiled softly, looking down at Lily's tiny face. Neither of us are giving up, she whispered. Not this time. Outside, the first stars began to appear, faint but steady, like little promises that even the darkest nights can end in light. Weeks passed after the meeting at the cafe. The air had turned crisp and the trees on Emily's street had begun shedding their leaves. Life felt different now, still heavy at times, but no longer empty. Every morning before work, Emily stopped by the hospital to visit Lily. The nurses had started letting her help with small things, holding her bottle, rocking her to sleep, humming to her softly. Each visit made her heart grow more attached and every goodbye grew harder. Claire called once every few days. Sometimes her voice was shaky, sometimes steady. She had started therapy and was trying to stay in a shelter program for mothers. It's not easy, she admitted one night over the phone. But I'm doing my best. I just want to be better for her. Emily believed her. She didn't say much, but every time Claire spoke, she could hear honesty in her tone. Still, there were moments when she wasn't sure what to feel. Anger, forgiveness, sadness, hope. They all blended together until she couldn't tell one from another. One cold Saturday afternoon, Emily walked into the hospital and found the nurse waiting for her with a serious expression. There's some news, Janet said. The baby's healthy enough to be released soon. Emily's heart leapt. Really, that's amazing. Yes, Janet replied. But there's something you should know. The caseworker has to decide where she'll go next, either into foster care, or with family if there's a suitable guardian. Emily froze. Family? Janet nodded slowly. Technically, you and the baby share blood. That makes you a potential guardian if you're willing to apply, but it's a big step. The words hit Emily like a rush of wind. She had spent most of her life alone, moving from one temporary home to another. She'd never imagined being on the other side of that system. That night, she barely slept. She kept picturing Lily's small face, her little fingers gripping Emily's thumb the way her eyes seemed to search for her voice. Could she really take care of her? She could barely afford rent and her job barely covered the basics. But the thought of Lily going into foster care, the same system that had swallowed Emily for years, made her chest ache. The next day, she met with the social worker, a kind woman named Mrs. Turner. They sat in a small office filled with children's drawings taped to the walls. I understand this is a lot to think about, Mrs. Turner said, her tone gentle. But you've been visiting regularly. The staff says the baby responds well to you. That bond is rare in these situations. Emily took a deep breath. I don't have much. Just a small apartment and a diner job. But I want her to have someone who won't leave her. Mrs. Turner smiled softly. Love counts for more than things, Miss Carter. But the process will take time. Background checks, home visits, and approval. Emily nodded. I'll do whatever it takes. When she left the office, her phone buzzed. It was Claire. Claire. Hey, I just finished my meeting with my counselor. Emily. How are you holding up? Claire, trying. They said I might qualify for supervised visits with Lily in the future. I want that. But I also know she's safer with you right now. Emily. She's doing great. She smiled at me today. Claire, thank you. Emily, I mean it. Emily stared at the message for a long time before typing back, We'll figure it out together. Over the next few weeks, Emily's life became a blur of paperwork, background checks, and interviews. The social worker visited her apartment, asked questions about her childhood, and even met her co-workers at the diner. Everyone at work was supportive. Some even pitched in old baby clothes and supplies. You've got the heart for this, her boss said one evening as she wiped down a counter. That little girl's lucky to have you. Emily smiled softly. Maybe I'm the lucky one. The day finally came when Mrs. Turner called. Congratulations, Emily, she said. You've been approved for temporary guardianship. You can bring Lily home tomorrow. Emily nearly dropped the phone. She couldn't speak for several seconds, just nodded even though no one could see her. That night, she cleaned her apartment from corner to corner. She borrowed a small crib from a neighbor and set it beside her bed. When she finished, she stood in the middle of the room looking around. It was still small, still imperfect, but for the first time, it felt like home. The next morning, when the nurse placed Lily in her arms, Emily felt a mix of fear and joy so deep she thought her heart might burst. Take good care of her, Janet said, smiling. I will, Emily whispered. I promise. Walking out of the hospital with Lily wrapped in a soft pink blanket, Emily felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. But it wasn't a burden. It was purpose. The first few nights were hard. Lily cried often and Emily barely slept. She learned quickly that babies didn't come with manuals, but every small moment, the tiny yawns, the first giggle, the way Lily's hand curled around hers made every sleepless hour worth it. One evening, while rocking Lily to sleep, Emily's phone buzzed again. Her heart jumped, half expecting another message from that unknown number, but this time it was Claire. Claire. I saw the photo the nurse sent. You look happy, Emily. I am. She's home now. Claire. I'm so grateful, Emily. I'll never stop trying to make things right. Emily. One day you'll be ready to be part of her life again. For now, she just needs both of us to love her. There was a long pause before Claire replied, I'll keep working on myself. Promise. The days turned into weeks, and slowly, a rhythm formed. Emily went to work during the day while a kind neighbor helped watch Lily. At night, she cooked small meals, sang lullabies, and learned to smile again. One Sunday afternoon, Claire came to visit for the first time. She looked nervous, holding a small stuffed bunny in her hands. Can I come in? She asked softly. Emily nodded. Of course, when Claire saw Lily, her eyes filled with tears. She's gotten so big, she whispered, kneeling beside the crib. She's been waiting to see you, Emily said, her voice gentle. For a long time, they both just sat there, watching the baby sleep. The air was heavy with things unsaid, regret, forgiveness, hope, but none of it needed words. Finally, Claire looked at Emily. You saved her, and you saved me too. Emily shook her head. We saved each other. After that visit, Claire started coming by once a week. She brought groceries sometimes, or small things for Lily. A blanket, a book, a photo frame. She was rebuilding slowly, piece by piece, and Emily found herself healing too. The girl who had once walked alone through rainy streets was no longer the same. She still struggled, still had nights when old fears crept in, but now there was light. One evening, as the three of them sat together, Claire reading softly, Lily asleep on Emily's lap, Claire turned to her and said, You know, I used to think family meant perfect people living perfect lives, but now I think it just means people who don't give up on each other. Emily smiled, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face. Yeah, I think so too. The phone on the table buzzed, breaking the quiet. Emily reached for it. For a split second, her heart raced. The memory of those first strange messages still lingered. But when she looked, it was just a text from her boss reminding her about her shift. She smiled, relieved, then looked over at her sister. We're going to be okay, aren't we? Claire nodded. Yeah, we already are. That night, after Claire left, Emily stood by the window holding Lily close. The city below sparkled under the streetlights. It was the same city she had once hated for its loneliness, but now it looked different. Softer. Kinder. She whispered to the baby in her arms. You changed everything. You know that? Lily stirred slightly, a tiny sound escaping her lips as if she understood. Emily smiled. You brought me home. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the quiet promise of new beginnings. Morning sunlight spilled through the window, painting soft gold across the small apartment. Lily was giggling in her crib, reaching for the mobile that dangled above her. The sound filled the room like music. Emily leaned against the doorway, coffee in hand, just watching. It had been 6 months since she'd brought Lily home. The days had been long and tiring, but they'd also been the happiest she could remember. The little apartment that once felt empty now carried the sounds of life. Tiny laughs, lullabies, and quiet late-night whispers. She had learned so much since that rainy night: the right way to hold a bottle, how to rock Lily to sleep, and how to calm her down when nothing else worked. But most of all, she had learned what love really felt like. Not the kind that came and went, but the kind that stayed, even when life got hard. The knock on the door pulled her out of her thoughts. It was Claire. She came by every Sunday now, a bag of groceries in one hand and her smile a little stronger each week. "Morning," Claire said, stepping inside. "I brought some fruit and diapers." "You didn't have to," Emily replied, but she smiled anyway. "I wanted to," Claire said. "It's the least I can do." She walked over to the crib and lifted Lily, who squealed in delight. "There's my little sunshine," she said, kissing her forehead. Watching them together still felt surreal to Emily. Just months ago, she hadn't even known Claire existed. Now her sister was part of her life, her small circle of family. They spent the morning together, Claire feeding Lily, Emily tidying up the kitchen. The sunlight through the window made everything look warm and alive. "You know," Claire said suddenly, "I had my last meeting with my counselor this week. They said I'm ready to start the next step." "That's great," Emily said, smiling. "You've worked really hard," Claire nodded. "They think I can start seeing Lily more often, maybe even move closer if everything keeps going well." Emily hesitated. "Are you ready for that?" Claire looked down at the baby in her arms, eyes soft. "I think I am, but I don't want to take her away from you. You've been her mom in every way that matters." Emily walked over and touched her sister's arm. "You're her mother too, Claire. She deserves both of us in her life. That's what makes family different from the past. It doesn't have to be all or nothing." Tears filled Claire's eyes, but she smiled through them. "You always say the right thing." Emily laughed quietly. "Trust me, I don't. But I've had a lot of practice learning what I didn't want to repeat." That afternoon, they took Lily to the small park down the street. The air smelled like grass and sunlight, and children's laughter floated around them. Claire pushed the stroller while Emily walked beside her, hands tucked in her jacket pockets. "Do you ever think about her?" Claire asked quietly. "Our mom?" Emily looked up at the sky. "Sometimes. I used to think about her every day, wondering why she left me. But lately, I think I'm starting to understand. Maybe she was broken too. Maybe she just didn't know how to stay." Claire nodded. "She'd be proud of you." Emily smiled faintly. "I hope so. I think she'd be proud of you too." They found a bench under a big oak tree and sat for a while. Lily was wide-eyed, watching the other kids run and play. Every few minutes, she'd squeal with excitement and wave her tiny hands. "She's going to grow up surrounded by love," Claire said softly. Emily looked at her sister. "That's the one thing I promised her the day I found her." A breeze blew through the park, and for a moment everything felt still, peaceful. Later that evening, back home, Emily rocked Lily to sleep while humming softly. Claire had already left, promising to call the next day. The apartment was quiet again, but it wasn't the kind of quiet that used to scare her. It was the kind that felt calm, safe. When she placed Lily in her crib and turned off the lamp, her phone buzzed on the table. For a second, her heart skipped, old memories of strange messages flashing in her mind. She walked over and picked it up. The screen showed a new message from an unknown number. "Unknown number. I'm glad you kept her safe." Emily froze. Her breath caught. That same tone, that same feeling, it was just like before. But how could that be? Claire had changed her number months ago. Her hands trembled slightly as she typed back, "Who is this?" A moment passed. Then another. The typing bubble appeared and disappeared. Finally, one more message came through. "Sometimes love finds us when we least expect it." "You were meant to find her." Emily stared at the words. Something deep inside her told her this wasn't meant to scare her. It was closure. A final message from someone who once watched from the shadows, now ready to let go. She put the phone down and smiled softly. Maybe it didn't matter who sent it. Maybe some things weren't meant to be explained. She looked at Lily, sleeping peacefully. "Yeah," she whispered. "Maybe I was." Days turned into weeks and life found its rhythm again. Claire moved into a small apartment just a few blocks away. They took turns watching Lily, shared dinners, and even laughed about their clumsy parenting moments. One evening, after putting Lily to bed, Emily and Claire sat on the balcony with cups of tea. The city lights glimmered below, and for once everything felt right. "Do you ever think about how strange it all is?" Claire asked. "If you hadn't walked down that alley that night, none of this would have happened." Emily nodded slowly. "Yeah, I used to think it was luck, but now I think it was meant to be." Claire smiled. "Maybe life knew you needed her as much as she needed you." Emily looked up at the night sky, stars faint behind the city glow. Maybe so. Silence settled between them. Not the awkward kind, but the comfortable kind that comes when words aren't needed.